Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Hardesty. I'm a peds orthopedic surgeon at Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital in Cleveland. And I'm here today with Evelina Berger Vanderwall, who is not only an orthopedic spine surgeon, but the chair of orthopedics at the University of Colorado. And we're very excited to be able to speak with her today. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Dr. Hardesty. It's my honor.
Okay, so I'll just jump right in. My first question is, what changes have you seen in the management of spinal deformity over the course of your career?
Well, that's a great question because now I'm dating myself. But I can tell you I still fixed fractures when I started with Harrington rods, because it was right on the cusp of where pedicle screws came out. Was not available in South Africa at the time. I heard about these amazing things and what they can do. And so I lived through the residency with Harrington rods and then Zielkes. And then as I qualified my residency, pedicle screws were out. And then I traveled all over the world to see these amazing instruments and what it can do. And then that was probably the biggest jump forward for spine, was the invention of pedicle screws, because it got adopted across the world as the standard of care. And now we're to the point combining computer, artificial intelligence, navigation, where we can actually recreate the normal curves of the spine. If you think where we started with not having any instrumentation, fusing patients flat, putting them in casts and in body casts and terrible braces for months on end, and not paying any attention to their posture. I've seen this whole gamut, and it's just amazing. And I wish I have another 40 years of my career. Unfortunately, I don't, because I would be excited to see where this is going to go in the future.
Now, you did an ABC traveling fellowship, is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you learn new techniques during that fellowship that you were able to use in your practice?
I think for me was the jump between the use of the technology, which I had available at the time. But being a South African, you kind of practice a little bit of an island. I did spine tumors, which was really in the beginning, and I had access to CT and looked at 3D renderings of congenital scoliosis and thought how archaic our classification of non-segmentation is if you look at all the various variants. So I think just seeing the research and the energy with which the American surgeons approached these problems, which were worldwide, that really infused me when I went back to my country.
Excellent. I'm going to change subjects a little bit. I want to talk about your path to leadership and what moments or steps were particularly relevant for you in your path to becoming a leader.
I think the first thing was that I never envisioned myself ever as a leader or a chair. I knew I had this passion to do what is right by patients and would not leave any stone unturned. So I had this perseverance and grit to go. About 12 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and things did not go well for me. And I remember as I was lying there in the hospital thinking, what am I going to do if I cannot ever perform surgery again? And that's sort of turned my head as to how can I stay in clinical medicine? How can I make a difference? And I actively started to pursue leadership courses. I was already involved. I didn't realize it, but then started to hone my skills in terms of communication and what you should do and what you shouldn't do as a leader. And that was my turning point 12 years ago.
You enrolled in an ELAM course, is that right?
That's correct.
And do you think that course really helped you become a better leader?
Yes, it was an amazing opportunity. They have several universities that participate in this, and then you can send in your best candidates with support from the dean. It was very hard to get in. They have more than 100 applicants every year, and they only take about 65. When I did it, we were only 55. And what I learned there was how to communicate. I learned other aspects of what is needed from leaderships, financial techniques, financial skills that I never had. I could barely balance my own checkbook. But most of all was the camaraderie. I met women from similar backgrounds, from basic science to dentists to surgeons, who all had the same drive. And immediately you had a cohort and you felt that you weren't the odd one out. And so I think that group that you got, and we still keep in contact and we go to courses once a year, COVID besides. And it was just an amazing experience to meet these women and these leaders in the country and learn from them.
What percentage of your Elam class was female?
It's just for females. It's
okay.
Executive leadership in academic medicine, and it's the Hedwig von Buren. That's the whole name. And we were only females. And what they taught us was self-value. We had 360 evaluations. You learned your weaknesses and your strengths, and you learned how to use your strengths to cover up your weaknesses.
CASE offers a similar program that I got to take. And I echo your sentiments that being in an all-female class just really allows you to grow and network and gives you sort of a protected space to push yourself to be better. And I think those opportunities are invaluable for us.
Amazing.
Which leads me to my next question. How can we bring more females up to the leadership level? I think that's one of the biggest challenges left. Well, not left. There's lots of challenges for women in orthopedics, but breaking those upper barriers is particularly difficult.
I think you need role models and you need champions. There's a difference between these things. A role model is somebody that you want to emulate, but a champion is somebody that pushes you and tell you, yes, you can do it. And there are so few women in leadership positions across medical schools. If you think that 50% of the classes now are female, but only about 20% the last time I looked of all female physicians are in any leadership positions in medical schools. And so I think it is on us and on our male colleagues to afford the females those opportunities. The second thing is that you have to start young. So we have a grassroots movement that some of my female residents started, and we are getting to the medical students in their first and second year and show them what is orthopedics. And it's amazing. If you don't do it there, by the third year, they taint it because they would say, I want to do orthopedics. And somebody would say, oh, that's not for you. And that's from other disciplines. So it's interesting. So you have to get to them young, and then you have to teach them how unique they are and self-value. As females, we all have a little bit of an imposter syndrome, and we don't believe in ourselves. And it's that fine balance between believing in yourself, knowing that you're really good, and being arrogant. You have to find the balance in there to know that you can do it.
That is really good advice. All of that is wonderful. Okay, what would you tell your medical student self if you got a chance to give yourself advice?
Thinking back, the thing I needed the most was confidence. Sounds hard today to think about it, but I had no confidence, and people did not have confidence in me. Nobody believed that I would, first of all, get to medical school. And then nobody believed that I would finish medical school. And then when I finished medical school, there was sort of a rude awakening, because what I had envisioned as being a doctor wasn't what I was doing. And therefore, I then joined the military and had an opportunity to do orthopedics. And I still remember me, female. And that's where I had champions. So I think confidence is the one thing that I wish I had when I was a medical student. Confidence in my own ability and not always doubting myself.
I think you and I had a similar experience in that it was someone else who said to us, hey, you should think about orthopedics. I wonder how many females have to have somebody tell them to consider orthopedics versus those who hear about it and think, I could do that. I hope that we're getting to a place where more people think of it, of their own free will, but I do think we probably need to say to more people, hey, have you thought about orthopedics?
I totally agree.
Compare the challenges of caring for spinal deformity patients to those of being a department chair.
They're both so similar, and yet the one is more stressful than the other. So I'll keep you in suspense. So for both of those, you need to have a plan. You can't take care of spinal deformity without a plan. Both these jobs, you need to be able to listen to your patients. You need to be able to listen to your faculty. You're not in an island. You're not the king or the queen. You are just there to be their leader. You have to be in the trenches. That means you have to be able to do the surgery. You have to be able to take call. You have to be able to do all the things that it's expected of a chair. And most of all, you build relationships. I build relationships with my patients, just like I build relationships with faculty across the medical school. If you ask what is the most easiest thing to do, I would say it's spine surgery. It's hard to be a chair. The human factor, once I'm in the OR, I'm in control. Okay, I've done my pre-op planning. I've worked up the patient. I've optimized the patient. I have a plan. And I know plan A, B, and C, and I know how to execute. It doesn't always work like that when you work with people, because you can have a plan, and then all of a sudden you have one naysayer in the group, and then you have to switch your plan on a dime and change the approach to get the desired outcome. So it's much more stressful to be a chair because I feel responsible for the department. I look at all the cars parked in the morning when I walk in, and I see assistants, and I see car seats, and I see kids, and I see babies, and I see young residents, and I go like, I can't fail, because if I fail, everybody depends on me for their income and their livelihood and their career, and that weighs terribly big on my shoulders. That's the things that make me not sleep at night.
It's also what makes you an excellent chair.
I try. I fail, and then I apologize and say, okay, didn't do that well. We'll try again.
And I cannot imagine anything more difficult to sort of wrangle than the personalities of a bunch of surgeons.
It's interesting, to say the very least.
Yeah. Let's see. Are there things that females should specifically do or avoid on their path to leadership?
Yes, there are significant potholes. In my opinion, female surgeons fall into two categories. And I just want to say that we have 34% female faculty, so we are a very balanced department. And they are either so intimidated that they don't step up to the plate and harm themselves that way, and you can nudge them along. Complete opposite of the spectrum is that I see females who constantly feel that they are being wronged. And that's a much more difficult problem to solve. I've had multiple conversations with Christy Weber, our previous president, about this. And that is that when you're a young faculty and people mentor you, your peers mentor you and say, you know, maybe you should do this surgery this way, or maybe you look at your outcomes that way. You have to be very careful to not take that personally and not see that as discrimination against me as a female, because that's the worst thing you can do, because you close your ability to hear, to listen, to get advice, and to grow. So that's my biggest caveat, that I see very young faculty out of residency. They've worked their whole career to first get to medical school, competitive, and then competitive in orthopedics, and then do a very competitive fellowship. And just like we all are, it takes you 7 years out of fellowship to establish your style and feel comfortable in what you do. And it's a critical period where the mentorship of young female faculty, that they should not take that as personal critique, because they shut themselves out completely, and then people stop talking to them, and then they never improve. And that's the biggest pothole I see women step into.
That's such excellent advice. And I like the statistic you gave that it takes 7 years to sort of find your way as a young attending. I didn't put that number to any specific measurement, but That's probably about the time I really felt comfortable in my own skin finally and confident in myself. So that makes perfect sense. How did your experiences as a military doctor influence your leadership style?
It's an interesting question. In the military, everything is regimented and everything is planned to the T. What is different in a leader that is non-military is the buy-in. And so I think that distinct difference from having been in the military and having be there at 7 a.m. and you're going to do this work versus in the real life outside of the military, we have choices. And how to balance that choices that you allow your faculty and your people around you to have their own personal development, but still steer them to the right outcome. So I think it influenced me to be not draconic and not say, well, I'm the chair and this is the way I do it and this is the way everybody is going to do it. And it's always a buy-in. You're a leader, you're not a king. And there's a huge difference. If you're a king or a queen, people bow to you. If you're a leader, you have people following you. If you don't have people following you, then you're an unsuccessful chair. So it is a distinct difference. I think the only thing that the military taught me was perseverance, grit, and the answer is always yes, sir. So yes, you can do it. We'll just have to find a way.
That would be such a challenging shift in the way you both worked and thought about things, but I'm sure that the background helped you not just lead other people, but see things from a different perspective. All right, so I appreciate all those very deep, complex questions. And now I'm going to ask you a series of short questions, which are just meant to be fun and let people get to know you a little better. So here we go. What book are you currently reading?
I don't. I don't even have time to read a journal, let alone a book. Okay.
Okay. Fair enough.
But the books that I enjoy the most is the Harry Potter series, because I enjoy the way that J.K. Rowling wrote it. It's not the story, it's her writing style is fantastic, and that's what I enjoy.
I'm in the middle of reading those books to my kids. So it's very relevant for us right now. And I read them, of course, when I was younger, but it's so cool to go back and read those to my kids and appreciate lots of different things as an adult. But you're right, her writing is incredible.
Yeah.
And now my house is decorated to look like here. It looks like Hogwarts everywhere. What was your first ever job?
I was a music teacher. I had a major in music, and even in high school, I started to teach music and theory classes to grade schoolers.
Do you still play?
Yes, I do.
What instruments?
I majored in piano, but I also played the church organ, and that's how I put myself through college. I would pay for every wedding and a funeral, and I would earn $10, and that was big money then.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you prefer to eat in or go out? I guess that's a pre-pandemic question.
Yeah, it's both. I actually enjoy my home. Our favorite meal is the barbecue, and we will barbecue under an umbrella in the snowstorm. So love to buy a good cut of meat and then barbecue it to my own taste, and it's not cold, and I don't have to send it back, and I can enjoy my own wine. And when I travel, I love to eat at different restaurants, different cuisine.
I think I read somewhere that you hunted when you were a kid. Do you still do that?
Yes, I still do. I got a big elk here in Colorado about 10 years ago. So love to do that. We went this past season, but it's been so dry. And after the firestorm last year, we didn't see anything.
My aunt is a guide in Wyoming for hunting trips.
Oh, great.
She just talks nonstop about the experiences in that part of the country, which is not where I live. But let's see. If you could win an Olympic medal for anything, and it can be a real thing or a fake thing, what would it be?
Oh my God. Sailing.
Sailing.
I love to sail. Yeah.
Can you do that around Denver much?
No, you can't.
Okay.
But I just enjoy sailing.
All right, we'll switch places. You could come sail here on the lake, and I'll come to Denver to go hunting. Let's see. What was your favorite subject in school?
History. I love history.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to say history was my favorite subject. I love history.
What is one thing your mother or father taught you that stayed with you?
Hard work.
What is something about you that surprises people?
I have a keen sense of humor, and it's a way to de-stress. Even in the OR, I will always find a way to laugh about things.
What is something you can do that will make you happy no matter what?
Be with my family.
That's an excellent answer. What is your least favorite spine surgery?
A discectomy in an obese patient.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. What's at the top of your bucket list?
I've had a very privileged life, and I've really done a lot of the things that I've wanted to do in terms of travel and hunting and all of this. So I've kind of completed my bucket list. And it's also a lifestyle, because if there's always something that you want to do, then you're never fulfilled. So it's very hard for me to say what's at the top of my bucket list, but I would say sailing in the Mediterranean. I just have this yearning to sail in the Mediterranean.
That's an excellent bucket list item.
Yeah.
What's your favorite place that you've ever traveled?
Alaska.
Oh, any particular part of Alaska?
Been there 5 or 6 times, and I love to go fishing in the Cook Inlet. Done some deep sea fishing there, and it's just an amazing place.
Also a really good answer. There's no bad part of Alaska, unless you're stuck. Let's see. What is one thing you would change about yourself?
Oh, I wish I would be taller. I'm so short. I always have to stand on 2 steps in the OR just to work with the residents. And when I forget to put the steps, they straddle, and it looks just awful in our OR. So I wish I was taller, so I could wear nicer clothes and not have to stand on a step.
That's perfect. And last question, what do you hope will be your very last surgery before retirement? What's the one you'd want to go out on?
That's a very big philosophical question, because you want to go out when people still revere you and remember you. So I think just doing what I do every day, which is adult spinal deformity, just doing that one more time, doing it with a co-surgeon so that somebody can take care of that case and know it went well.
That sounds like an excellent last case.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the questions I have. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, it's just an honor and a privilege to be here, and I'm very grateful. We've been in America for 21 years. We are all citizens, and it has afforded me an amazing career and opportunities. So really grateful to be here.
Well, it's been my honor and an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you today. I am so glad everyone will be able to hear this podcast, and I look forward to any opportunity to see you again, hopefully at the next SRS meeting.
That would be amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, hi, Nancy. I'm Megan Johnson. I'm a pediatric orthopedic surgeon in Dallas, Texas at Scottish Rite Hospital for Children. And we're so happy to have you joining us today so we can learn a little bit about you and your career and where you are and how you got here.
So, yeah, I'm Nancy Hadley Miller. I'm a pediatric orthopedic surgeon. I'm currently at University of Colorado, Denver. I'm a member of the SRS. I trained in Boston for my residency and then did my fellowship in Iowa. I was extremely fortunate. At the time, I had no idea that Dr. Poncetti was emeritus, but was still going to be practicing. And so he and I got to be extremely good friends. And my primary mentor was Stuart Weinstein, which certainly needs no introduction to this group. And between the two of them, I just had an absolute wonderful year. There was not a great job opportunity towards the end of that year. And so I ended up staying on for what was known as a pediatric research fellowship. Prior to medical school, I had started I was in a PhD program. And so I had a significant amount of bench work behind me when I started medical school and finished, fortunately. However, I never thought that I would ever go back to that if I didn't have the opportunity to do so during my training. That's when I went into, didn't find a job or didn't have a job that I really preferred. I actually went on to do a research fellowship and started my bench work again. And that led me into a project which, unbeknownst to me, the Marfan syndrome at that time was just being discovered.
Okay.
It's the gene, actually, the protein was just discovered, fibrillin 15 or FBN1. And Dr. Ponseti really thought that there was a connective tissue disorder potentially related to those with adolescent idiopathic scoliosis. And so with that, he and I kind of had a few conversations. Then he left for his winter to Mallorca in Spain. And I found a lab to work in and then developed a project surrounding adolescent idiopathic scoliosis. And that really is probably why I am, where I am today, which is I have a wet bench laboratory. I've been funded through NIH and the SRS, and I would not be here without that 1 year going back to bench work. And Dr. Ponseti was a true inspiration for me.
Wow. That's a great story.
Yeah, it was 1 year of Dr. Ponseti. It was prior to his club foot time.
Okay.
He was doing club feet,
Mm-hmm.
but it was prior to, I would say, commercialization, or it was prior to his putting that out on the web.
Okay.
And on YouTube or whatever, however he did it. That was around the year, I believe, 2000. And I was in my fellowship really I'd say a lot earlier than that, about 10 years earlier than that. And so, he and I, for 2 years, Friday afternoon clinic was all club feet.
Okay.
And it was a memory I cherish forever, because it was he and I and lots of feet. But his real passion in the laboratory sense was scoliosis.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't necessarily realize that.
Yeah, I'm not sure I knew that either.
Yeah, he had some earlier work looking in the laboratory and looking at collagen fibers and thinking that they were potentially, there was some glycosylation a little bit started. But then when the Marfan's gene was discovered, and I was able to make some connections with those people that discovered the Marfan's gene, which is fortunate for me, and find some antibodies and did some histology, cell culture work. It was a boatload of fun. And then it actually was eventually published in JBJS, which was really a plume in my hat at that time, because I was just out into practice.
Yeah. Nancy, do you mind if we back up a little bit and just kind of talk about you growing up and how you got interested in going into medicine and what your parents did for a living, and if there was any influence from your family?
Yeah, so I was born in England. My dad was in the Air Force, and we spent most of our time in England until about middle school. And my dad was a career Air Force person. He was actually administrator, but then he actually went into hospital administration.
Okay.
We moved back to the United States around the DC area. And I just filled my time, actually was a nurse's aide at the Walter Reed Hospital when it was just Army. And actually it was the latter part of the Vietnam War, I remember.
Okay.
And we weren't allowed to go on the men's wards, but I was 14, maybe years old. But it really impacted me, I think, kind of my love of, taking care of people, really.
Yeah.
And then I went to college, got diverted into sports. And then I didn't know what to do after college, actually. I got into art school.
Okay.
I didn't follow that. And so went on to a PhD program.
Okay.
But once I was there, I just remember, after not very long, I realized that I just didn't want to do just that all my life. And I was drawn to medicine, I think through my experience as a kind of just a nurse's aide. My his love of kind of hospital administration and talking about that type of field with him. And I think that's what kind of drew me to medicine.
Yeah.
So when I applied to medical school, I got in, fortunately, and went through medical school. And it seems like at that point, there was they didn't have a lot of these interim, like interventional radiologists. At that time, you were either a surgical or medical personality.
Yeah.
And I was a surgical personality. There's no doubt about it. I loved art. I played the piano. And that's what led me down the surgical road. When I got into general surgery, I had a couple of male mentors that really helped me along, took me to the operating room. My mother wanted me to be a radiologist.
Were they both supportive of your going to medical school?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. They were very, very supportive.
Yeah.
My dad was like, if I had to do it over again, I'd be a doctor.
Yeah. That's great.
So they were very, very supportive. But then and at the time, I have all brothers, grew up with just a boys' household, and my dad was a huge sports person. And at that time, there was if you were interested in sports, you did ortho.
Yeah. Right.
And I said, okay, I guess that looks like where I'm going, because I just love sports. I was a college athlete, and that's started me down the ortho route.
Were there a lot of women in your medical school class?
There was probably about 15% maybe.
Okay.
Of 100, I think it was 140, 150.
And were you the only person interested in orthopedic surgery?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Did you find that hard to navigate, just not having other women doing that with you?
I don't remember that, because I had a very good mentor. He was a pediatric orthopedist that really pushed me along. My backstop was pediatrics, but I don't know. I can't imagine myself as a pediatrician.
Yeah, same.
I was lucky at the time, I think, in some ways, is that a lot of orthopedic programs were looking for no offense, their token female.
Yeah.
And I got in early. There was no match at that time. And I got into 1 or 2 programs, and I was so nervous. And I got into my 3rd program right on Christmas Eve, actually, I remember. And I just had to say yes. There was a few programs in the match I probably might have gone to, but I couldn't. Nancy, you can't risk saying no at this point.
Yeah.
So I said yes and went to Boston. So that was that. And
yeah,
I was the first woman in my program, the only woman. So all of a sudden you had another 15 big brothers.
Yep.
And it was unusual. It was from the first day.
Yeah.
There's tons of stories, the first day, the 2 chief residents took me after coffee, said, we just thought you'd be bigger. What are you supposed to say to that?
Yeah.
We thought you'd be bigger. Well, this is what you got, and, there's lots of stories throughout time that, it was a time when, and I come from a very Midwestern family. So you just dug in your heels and you did what you're supposed to do. Yeah. And you didn't look up, and you didn't, there was a lot of sexual harassment. There was. Yeah. It's not that you didn't realize it was there, but it was a time frame in my personality also that I can't say tolerate, it's not quite the right word, but you kind of put up with some, then kick them in the pants and then keep moving. Yeah. And show them that you can do the stuff, that routine is not everything. Yeah. And I look back and I wonder why I wasn't maybe more vocal about things. But again, it had something to do, I think, with the time and the personality. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I received my acceptance into the academy, we were numbered. I think I was like 131. Wow. We were numbered. Yeah. And, my mother went with me to the academy meeting, and, she leaned over and she goes, Nancy, they're all boys in here. Yeah. I went, Mom, yeah, I've been telling you that for a long time. Yeah.
Was there anybody specific in your training that was very supportive and promoting of you in your career that you can kind of pinpoint?
The chairman of my department, Bob Leach, he was a big sports guy, but I think under the wings, he always supported me. Yeah. When a case came up in conference, a post-operative case, and he would say, oh my gosh, you did that. Oh, Nancy did that. Oh, well, oh my gosh, I wish she was on my team. Yeah. And when there was a time when there were significant issues with some sexual harassment, I would say that. And he called me aside and talked to me, and I told him. And he never doubted me. And he, wasn't reprimanded or punished or anything like that. And he took it to heart. And, but I think underneath, he just always supported me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the outward support of, you're never in the locker room together with, notes for the previous case or notes from the, past case or anything like that. It was pretty lonely. I can't say it wasn't.
Yeah.
And then I think Stu Weinstein and Ponseti, they were extremely supportive.
Yeah.
And again, maybe it wasn't the type of support different type of support than they would give a guy in some ways.
Sure.
But I think he always was very supportive of me as developing my career. And I appreciate that.
Yeah. And then did you find, kind of going into the field of spine and spine deformity within pediatric orthopedics, how did you find the SRS when you first joined? Did you find it welcoming to you? Was it, there's still a lot of men, but
There's another interesting story.
Yeah.
So at that time, you were only accepting the SRS if your practice was, 50% or 75% spine.
Okay.
And I was a general orthopod, a peds orthopod. I did Blounce, I did Perthes, DDH, a bunch of stuff. Yes, I did some spine, but my first job was at Baylor, and Wendell Irwin and Jess Dixon were there. And of course, they had all the spine kind of wrapped up in their, consultations. And so there was not a lot of spine to be had, basically. And so I did lots of things. I did CP, did a few spine, but not that much. But with the work that I had done during my research fellowship, and then I ended up getting an ORAF award. And I found a lab that he said, a PhD, guy named William Horton, who actually went on to run the research institution or aspects of the Oregon Shrine. He was a PhD. And he critiqued my grant that I put in the ORAF. And he said, look, if you get this, you can have a bench in my lab. And so I got it. And that was very soon after my beginning of my practice. And once I got that, and then I got an SRS grant. And then Mark Asher asked me, sent me an email and asked me when we were at the ORS to join an etiology committee. And so, okay, I'm joining the etiology committee, and it was a fabulous experience. So our first meeting was at that SRS. He was president, and it was me, Tom Lowe, a gentleman from England, one from Canada, a few people. And towards the end of the meeting, Tom said, well, the gentleman from, I think it was Michael Earhart, I'm dropping the name, but he said from England, he said, well, Tom said, well, we'll have to make sure that you are a guest member of the American SRS or United States SRS, because I know you're in the British SRS. And so we said, fine. And so the meeting was over, it was kind of leaving. And I said, Tom, I said, Tom, I have a problem. I said, I'm not a member of the SRS. I have a grant, but you have to have a certain percentage of your practice. So they won't let me in. And he went, oh, this is a problem. So they ended up, that was kind of the instigation, going to Mark Asher and saying, we have to change our modus operandum here for PhDs or people interested, and so it kind of instigated to change. So then I became a member of the SRS.
Okay. Well, I have kind of one last wrap-up question. You've had a fascinating pathway, and I'd love to find out more, but my last question is, a lot of women coming up in medicine and, as medical students have an interest in orthopedics, but really question whether or not they can do it, both from a physical strength standpoint and just a perception that ortho's still for athletes who want to do medicine. So what would your advice be to women coming up in medicine who have an interest but are nervous or worried about their path ahead?
So I think you really need to, first of all, you really need to want to do it. There's no doubt about it. But that's medicine in and of itself.
Yeah.
You really need to want to do it. I think working with your hands is actually kind of essential for any type of surgeon, but I think particularly for orthopedics, the visualization, the three-dimensional aspects. And I think I put yourself in environments where you're, working with screws and drills and, three-dimensional concepts, and see if you really like it, because that's really what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, finding a mentor. I was kind of driven by some sort of inner self, but I think that was more we're in a different world now. And I think there are mentors out there. Now, I find myself, have to almost teach myself to be a mentor, because I never really had one.
Yeah.
And so it's when people look at me, I can remember went to Hopkins, and one of the female residents came up to me and says, "Oh my gosh," she says, "you have it all. You have a family, you have this, you have this, you have that." I looked at her and I said, "What are you talking about? I'm just kind of doing what I want to do."
Yeah.
And the strength bit is not that, finesse is better than strength.
Yep.
And so the strength, there's so much power now, power tools, finesse is not it. And strength is not it, but finesse is really where it's at. And I would find a mentor. And if I had anything to say, the biggest part between, I think, orthopedics or orthopedics, general surgery, and a medical track is the morning. If you want to have a family, which I do, having those 1 or 2 days a week in which you can take those kids to school is like gold.
Yeah.
And that's where the big difference is. It's you miss some mornings. And you kind of have to realize that, and then cherish the ones you have. You cherish every moment you have with your kids, your family, your husband, anything. But I think if I had any reflection to tell kids or tell younger women, is that that's the biggest difference between kind of a surgical pathway and medical pathway, but also a surgical academic pathway where you may have a little bit more control of yourself, or even, sometimes private practice, you have a little more control of your schedule versus another pathway.
Yeah.
Because those mornings, I think, are important. And they become more important. I have or people tell me, I remember a general surgeon tell me, her baby was like just born. I'm going to take off the next 6 months. And I'm like, that's the wrong time to take off, because a baby will always know who your mother is.
Yeah.
And if you can stay up and be on call, you can stay up and feed them at 3:00 in the morning. And if you have those 1 or 2 mornings a week and you pop home early, make sure your home is close to work, you can make that work.
Yeah.
But once they get into that teenage years, those are the times when you really want to make sure you're around.
A good point. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, every family's different and runs different, but
yeah,
I would say, but I think the first thing is there are mentors out there now. We have a great mentorship program, and I would find a mentor. And it doesn't have to be one person, be a couple people. If you're having trouble with your surgical skills, you can find some mentors. If you're just having life balance problems, another mentor.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be one person. And you don't have to have your kids young.
Yep.
There are always different ways to have families.
Yeah.
And I just think there's a lot more supportive baffles or scaffoldings out there.
Yeah.
Than there's. So I would just urge you to reach out and use them.
Well, I think that's great advice. I really appreciate your time and talking to us, and you're an inspiration, and thank you for blazing the trail for the rest of us. We appreciate all the doors you've opened for us all. It was great to get to know you and talk to you.
Well, thanks. Reach out anytime.
Thanks, Nancy.
Okay.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Scoliosis Research Society is a nonprofit professional organization made up of physicians and allied health personnel. Their primary focus is on providing continuing medical education for healthcare professionals and on funding and supporting research in spinal deformities. Please visit srs.org for further information.